So what Plex does is it's based on research, extensive research, which looks at what's going down in your body when you're on a ketogenic diet. We looked at everything that was going down the body and everything we need to bring up to optimal levels. Keto adaptation is a very complex process. It takes time to adapt. We have to be able to produce and utilize ketones, right? So we promote endogenous production of ketones and the ability to use exogenous ketones. And the way to do that is to optimize the internal machinery that you have in order to create energy in the mitochondria. It's very important when we talk about utilizing ketones to be able to address this issue. So how do we increase mitochondria? Who's intermittent fasted? Great way to increase mitochondria. Obviously, who's ketogenic dieted? Most of us, right? Okay. Circuit training is another way to do it, and interval training. The reason why those do it is because you're depleting carbohydrates from the muscle. If you deplete carbohydrates from the muscle, it forces you to have to work off fat as fuel. And that's what interval training and circuit training does. That's what intermittent fasting does. When you deplete yourself of carbohydrate, you have to rely on mitochondria to produce energy. What if we could take a supplement that could turn on those systems? So when we actually went and made this formula, we had to have an understanding of like, how is new mitochondria formed? Because that's what we need to target. DNA is a blueprint for you. When we're doing this 24-hour system, we're trying to optimize that blueprint. Mitochondria is very difficult because there's DNA inside of the cells, in the center of the cells, the nucleus, but there's also DNA in the mitochondria. But you have to somehow coordinate the two to make new mitochondria. So it's a very difficult process, and we're making this formula like, well, what's the best way to target that? Well, it turns out that you almost have a switchboard. Okay, think of it as like a switchboard, and there's a master regulator of this switchboard that can coordinate or orchestrate both the DNA and the mitochondria and the DNA inside of the nucleus. And that switchboard is called PGC1 alpha. When you take MitoP2Q, you see a dose response where you increase mitochondria. MitoP2Q is inside of it, and MitoP2Q technology actually switches on the master regulator to turn on mitochondria. So that's why we call them upgraded electrolytes. If you look at upgraded electrolytes, it's not just things like potassium, they're bound in specific compounds like with bicarbonate, which is a specific buffer. Think about like when you're training hard and you get that burning sensation, bicarbonate's a buffer. And it goes down oftentimes on keto. So when you're taking basically the Plex, ideally you're taking it 3 times a day. And on top of that, you're targeting the mitochondria all 3 times of those days. That way you can increase fat metabolism. That way you can increase the ability to use fuel.